Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. So glad to see you all here joining us today. And I, Sayeda Rida, working as Manager Performance, Engagement, and Analytics at HR Metrics, welcome you to the first session of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Community of Practice webinar, which will focus on discussing the best practices of global DEI benchmarks by creating a repository of examples to implement the GDEIB with a view to advance a domain of professional DEI practices. The interaction will be every 2 months, and it will rely on face-to-face virtual meetings as well as web-based collaborative environment to communicate, connect, and conduct community activities. So today's session will include a discussion on the first 3 categories, which includes vision, leadership, and structure, followed by a practical example of how the GDEIB assessment was carried out for an organization, the challenges that were faced, and how they were overcome. The Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion benchmarks are the standard for organizations around the world. The GDEIB helps organizations determine strategy and measure progress in managing diversity and fostering inclusion. The standard has 28 dimensions in diversity, 15 categories, and a total of 4 groups. The purpose of this group is to discuss how to use the different benchmarks in different countries, regions, and demographics. So on our panel we have today is Zahid Mubarik, CEO, HR Metrics and Diversity Hub Pakistan. Hajra Omer, Head HR, Nestle Pakistan. Janet Huber, Senior Vice President and Director, D&I, BOK Financial, USA. Sarah Baig, Head Talent, Diversity and HR Relationship Management from HBL Pakistan. And last but not the least, Habiba Sulman, SVP, Head D&I, Faisal Bank, and also the Regional Head Learning at Faisal Bank Limited, Pakistan. So each speaker today will be presenting for 15 minutes, followed by a 5 minutes Q&A after each speaker. All the speakers are requested to keep their videos on during the presentation. The audience are requested to kindly keep their mics muted and videos off in order to avoid disruption. However, during the Q&A session, it is recommended to keep your videos on for better communication. As you're aware that Muslims around the world are observing the month of Ramadan, therefore we aim to finish in time. Today's session is also valid for 2 SHRM recertification PDCs for those who are enrolled in our SHRM recertification program. So to start off the session, I'd like to invite Zahid Mubarik, CEO HR Metrics, who's also the President SHRM Forum Pakistan and the Chairman HR Standards Technical Committee Pakistan. He's also the member of the ESG Task Force Pakistan Stock Exchange and a member ISO Technical Committee 260 HR Standards. Zahid is also on the board of the Center for Global Inclusion USA. Thank you, and over to Zahid.
Hello. Can I request everyone to please mute yourself? Okay, so once again, a very warm welcome, everyone. We have a very good number of registrations today from different parts of the world. So I would like to say the good evening, good afternoon, and good morning to wherever you live. I think Rida has taken a good start. And Mercedes Martin, my apology. I think Rida has forgotten to mention your name, but we definitely acknowledge your presence, and we are grateful to you and all the speakers for sparing the time to be with us during this webinar. So
thank you, Zahid. Wonderful to be here.
Thank you. This webinar, as you all know, is taking place from the HR Metrics platform, which has expertise in some of the unique areas. We are the pioneers in talking about and spreading the HR analytics by connecting the HR performance with the organizational performance in the Asia. Then we are the exclusive partner with the SHRM, which is the world's largest HR association in Pakistan, offering the global HR certifications. D&I is in our DNA. So we have been able to facilitate around 50 organizations and around hundreds of the people qualified on this. And lastly, the HR standards on which we are working last more than 10 years. Again, Pakistan was the only pioneer country to be part of the 11 members committee, which was formed by the ISO Geneva, starting its first meeting in Washington. And we have been able to contribute toward the development of the 26 global standards which are being used by the organization. I just want to talk about some of the essential background information. I know we have a galaxy of speakers today to talk about the technical aspects, but why I want to take initial 5 to 7 minutes, because I frequently hear people that they are very much enthusiastic about the D&I, but they're not embracing the success and the kind of, the welcome that is required by the stakeholders, particularly your board of directors, the CEO, the CFO. For that matter, it's very much important. And I've experienced this thing personally, that you have to connect yourself with a lofty mission that exists at the global level, that exists at the industry level, and you have to connect the dots with your organization and the D&I. If you do it without those kind of linkages, I have seen that D&I remains more tactical, happening at the operation level, the managerial level, the senior people who have to allocate the resources, who have to give the funds, who have to give the money, they're not really concerned about it. So I'll give you some of the very strong reason why the D&I is important before talking about the how part of it. And I would like to be as brief as possible. On your screen, you can see findings from an organization which is called Tomo Ocean. And they look at the composition of the intangible and intangible assets of the 500 Fortune companies. And they have discovered that the value creation by the intangible has increased magnificently. 45 years, the intangibles, including the human capital, including the D&I, as you know, intangibles is not all about the D&I. D&I is a component of it, a predominant component. So 45 years ago, their value creation, the organization was less than 17%. Now it has gone to more than 90%. So the investors, the shareholders, the regulators are now under the tremendous pressure to give importance to the D&I, including the intangible. So this is one of the overarching reasons. Because of this changing phenomena, the organization is facing the issue of sustainability. So on your local stock exchange, or even at the global level, you look at the 500 Fortune companies, you find that some company which was 10 years ago on the top today may not exist. So what has fundamentally gone wrong? We have the fundamental shift is in the form of the knowledge economy. How you're able to take care of the knowledge economy, focusing more on the services, not just the production part of it. So sustainability is truly linked in a way that you have the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 SDGs, one of them exclusively talking about the gender equality, but the D&I is not all about the gender. You have the other components, including the quality education. So the SDG 4, 5, 8, 9, 10, and 16, they talk about the D&I, social justice, inclusion, reducing the inequalities within the society. ESG movement, which is basically based on the sustainability. You have the 3 pillars: the environment, social governance, and the S become the center pillar of the ESG. So in practical, in the measurable terms, there are various frameworks which talk about the ESG. On your screen, you have the World Economic Forum framework, which has defined metrics to execute the ESG. The 21 core metrics, and out of them, one of those metrics is the D&I. You see on your screen metric number 11. So these are the essentially required things for an organization to survive. And these days, in the name of the stakeholder capitalism, the investor, the board of directors, the regulators are showing complete sensitivity. And all these standards, for example, your organizations are being governed by the financial standards, which have been developed by IFRS, International Financial Reporting Standards. And you will be surprised to know that IFRS complete standards are going through the overall process, because previously they were purely focused on the tangibles, the financial outcome. But in financial outcomes, the product, the plant, equipment, raw material was considered. There was no element of the human capital ROI. There was no element of the D&I. Now it's going through a revision process. A business case. Since you have to invest money in the D&I, so you need to have a very clear payout or the cash inflow. So this is a, you can say, glimpse from a global research which clearly draws the linkages between the diversity, whether it's the gender diversity or the overall ethnic diversity. And by now we have a repository of hundreds of examples in Pakistan. Even last night, I was looking at the LinkedIn, for example, one of the leading company in Pakistan is the Anglo Fertilizer. They are very progressive on the D&I. And I could see the announcement by the CFO last night that it has doubled the share prices last night. So I'm not saying it's purely because of the D&I, but D&I is one of the attributary reasons. So you find an organization which is higher in the D&I, rather I would say highest in the D&I, and you also find the same organization performing very well on the terms of the share prices. So we have good example with us, and we are going to promote those examples in our future sessions. So to summarize, the important thing to see in this process is that the organizations have to be diverse, not just in terms of the employees, but in terms of the products, the services, the suppliers. So with that kind of focus in mind, they have to focus more on they have to be mainly concerned with the results, the problem solving, the engagement of all the stakeholders, and D&I is, I would say, best thing to do that. What we are doing to achieve and help to achieve the aim of globalizing the D&I mission of the D&I, we are helping the organizations for last more than 5 years. On your screen, you can find this year example, for example, Nestle in one of them, and many others example who are, you can say, exemplary organization practicing the D&I. And in a span of 5 years, I think every year we monitor. And we obtain the information in the form of the disclosure from the organization. So, for example, this year, more than 100 categories were being practiced by the organization in Pakistan, and their progression rate is quite encouraging and quite obvious. Similarly, the organization needs the qualified professionals. So to provide them a qualified talent, we help the organizations to develop their people. And we can also see a clear progression on the growth of these people. For example, Habiba Sulman today is one of the speaker, and I have clearly seen her growing very rapidly. For example, when the previous this brochure was developed, she was head of the D&I, now she's senior vice president. So there are greater opportunities for the organizations at the individual level. And the interesting part is that the people across the world are pouring in to basically develop the expertise in these areas. So without taking more time, I think I would like to come back to the panel. I would say a galaxy of the panels who are going to share solid examples of how the D&I can be practiced. And that's all from my side. If there's any question or comment, I'm available over here, and I'll be happy to address it at the end. This concept that we are coming up where everybody is together talking about the practical aspects, we want to do it on a regular interval. Why? Because the GDEIB is a document which tells you what to do. It doesn't tell you how to do. So the people from across the world, when they're together, they're able to share their examples from the different parts of the world, and that contributes towards the mutual learning. So we have created a program, I think, at least the 4 segments during the year, and I'm hoping for the more interaction in the future. That's all from my side. So with this, over to the first speaker, I think Rida is going to introduce, and the profile of the speaker, and she would continue from there. Thank you so much for your patient listening.
Thank you so much, Zahid. So the next speaker for today we have is Hajra Omer, the head of human resources at Nestle Pakistan. She has been associated with Nestle for over a decade in both national and international assignments. Prior to joining Nestle, Hajra worked in organization development at PepsiCo and as head of HR at Lumps. Hajra has also a key member of Nestle Regional Talent Leadership Team. She has worked with Asia, Oceania, and Africa markets, where she led the successful digital transformation of HR function across the zone. As an ambassador of D&I, she drives the business case to bring complementarity of thought to thrive innovation and fuel growth for the business. She has provided exceptional thought leadership to increase the representation of women in the workplace. In 2016, she pioneered the launch of Lean In Lahore chapter for FMCG industry to inspire and support women to achieve their career goals. Hajra is also an ICF certified master coach and takes keen interest in coaching young talent to unleash their true potential. Welcome and over to you, Hajra.
Thank you. I hope audible.
Absolutely, yes.
Just give me a minute. All right. So thank you everyone for joining the session, and thank you Zahid for giving us the opportunity to share the DEI structure and implementation. So I'll start from our North Star. Paul Bulke is our global CEO for Nestle, and his firm belief is that diversity in society must be reflected in the organization. So this is from where we start our journey. And coming to the local side of it, DI structure and implementation, Nestle has a very, very robust diversity acceleration plan. We have 3 dimensions in it. First one is on the bold leadership side. The other is on the empowering culture. And when you are done with these 2, you need to make sure that you have practices that are fully enabled. Picking the first one on the bold leadership, I will like to introduce or I will like to share basically the DI steering committee. So basically our CEO, who is Samir Shadid, he is diversity committee chairperson. And Mesam Abbas, who is BO Juices, is our market diversity champion. And I myself as head of HR, I'm the market diversity coach. The fundamental of sharing this slide is that the diversity journey in any organization is only successful if the top leadership is leading it and implementing it in a true spirit. How we do it, in addition to this, having a proper roadmap is in place. We do have diversity steering comms, and that happened every quarter throughout the year. What happened in these steering comms is we continue to monitor the right conditions for success, and we review overall diversity acceleration plans. We align our strategies and action plans, and that is also purely based on the gender compass, which you can see on the right side of my screen, which has all the modules starting from awareness towards retention, role models, attractiveness. And then we do have a robust plan where we track our D&I indicators, and we proudly share industry benchmark, because this is also very important that how the industry among us in Pakistan and across globally, how they are doing and what other benchmarks we can take, so we can actually build on that. Moving forward, I really want to emphasize on this one point that this is not just a regular diversity journey. We truly believe that this is our business case. And when we see at Nestle, innovation is one part where we feel that gender balance team help us to think about the diverse consumers and customers when we make and distribute our products. Similarly, in terms of culture, it is again very important that you can think better and you can lead towards better decision if there is a diverse team. And coming on the society side, women represent more than half of the education pool, and also they are the consumer who make the choices to buy the products. So promoting diversity is the right thing to do for us. It's not just that it's an initiative we want to do it. We strongly believe that this is something that can lead or that is a business case for us to grow overall in the industry. So it is also very, very closely integrated in our values. So D&I is embedded in our core value. Our value at Nestle is respect. When we talk about respect for ourselves, for others, and for future, there is one dimension, respect for diversity. And at Nestle, we have a corporate business principle, and D&I is equally embedded in our business principle as well. And again, something very close to our hearts while working at Nestle. So I want to share one more example that top leaders in our company, they really sponsor this overall program. One example is Bruno, who was our former market head Nestle Pakistan. He was the chairman of OICCI CSR committee, and he was the one who made women empowerment a joint OICCI initiative, first time in that forum. So that speaks itself that even on the other forums, we take diversity very seriously, and we try to make sure that everybody contributes in that journey. Our CEO just took the pledge that he wants to help forge a gender equal world. And within our organization, we do a lot of female connects by leadership teams with the senior leaders, where we share the practices and also female connect to explore the opportunity areas within the organization. How we monitor progress, these are just few KPIs I just want to share here, but there are a lot of other KPIs in our organization which we monitor. So in last 5 years, we have 112% increase in women in leadership positions. Usually we were struggling that it is always easier to induct females at the entry level position, but the minute we need to talk about the leadership position, we need to build lot of development plans and lot of successions. This is the first time that when we are open to lateral hirings, even on the leadership positions, and we were able to make a jump in this category. If you see the gender balance dashboard, this is again our informed decision through data analytics. In 2020 new hires, you could see it's 64% females. We further moved to 70% females in the value is really high. It's 83 to 98. And this is again on the permanent positions without creating any new position. Against the existing position, wherever there is a turnover, we make a specific efforts that how we can get trained and well-educated females on those roles. Another very important thing for all, everybody who is listening or anybody who wants to take is as a best practice. So wherever in the organizations you feel that women want to work, harassment is one side that needs full coverage. And at Nestle, we have a speak up for what's right. And we have a non-compliance portal where you can actually put up your complaint and we can take this up, and there's a zero tolerance for any type of harassment at our workplace. And then we also make sure that we do regular communications and make sure that all our employees are aware of this forum. Speak Up is independently operated by a third party to ensure anonymity when requested. So this is also very important, that how to keep the whole information confidential. Gender sensitization is again something where we need to manage it through a systematic learning plans. So 95% of our employees working currently in Nestle, they are fully trained on sexual harassment and also on unconscious bias trainings. So not only that they are trained, we also tend to give refresher as well. For all the new joiners, it is mandatory to go through these sessions, but even for employees who are in the system, the refreshers really help them to just refresh the overall concept. Similarly, in our Nestle People Academy, which is the overall development tool for all the leaders, there is a dedicated D&I page in Nestle People Academy, and this is just like, it depends on which topic you want to gain more information. You can just click on that. You can get in the e-learning. There are some physical hybrid sessions happening as well. So it is purely employees' choice that what type of session they want to opt for. At the organization level, we do have some mandatory learnings which we track, and there we make sure that all employees are basically they cover themselves on some fundamental learnings which are very important at our organization level. On the empowering culture, there are a lot of other good practices Nestle follow, which are most of the organization I feel that they also follow. There are just 2-3 I thought that it's good to mention here. Recently, we have noticed that in our country, in different industries, daycare is becoming a norm, but there is an age bracket cap, and then again, moms, they struggle where to put the kids. And in the country, there is not a good infrastructure to have daycare facilities. So we increase the age bracket for daycare, and now up to 10 years age, they can avail that. Similarly, as we are progressive in terms of hiring for non-barrier jobs as well. So for example, in fields, sales, Sales is not typically a category where females want to work, but recently we were able to break this barrier, and we hired a lot of females in our sales side. And I think this trend is overall improving across Pakistan as well. So when we had a connect with our female field sales force, the one thing they were struggling was they are in the remote locations, they need driver allowances so they can better perform the job. So this is again to empower culture, we enable this practice, and we just recently introduced this thing. In addition to 6 months paid maternity, we have recently started a 30 days paid paternity as well. So they can support their counterparts regardless in which organization they are working. So I would like to share two of our flagship initiatives. This is related to breaking stereotypes. So one of our initiative is Karo Etamad, that is believe in yourself. And this is a stereotype in the field of supply chain, field sales, engineering, medical delegates. So most of these jobs are tough and they require a lot of male interaction compared to a regular office job. So what we do is in this program, we hire associates. We train them in these fields so they don't feel uncomfortable when they are going out and performing this. And our conversion rate from these associate to a permanent hire is extremely high as well. So this is working very well for us at Nestle, and it's been few years since we have launched this thing, and this is certainly one program we are scaling up in near future as well. The other one is Phir Se Kar Dikhao. So that is pretty much returnship plan. So there are females who take break from their careers. It can be different reason. It can be due to marriage. It can be due to maternity. It can be any other family problem that they just took a break, or any personal problem. So when they are out of the workforce, it is very difficult for them to get back into the workforce. So this 1-year contractual position helped them to relearn the skill set, and then they can also apply for all the against the right permanent position. And again, the conversion rate of this returnship program is also very high. And I think it's working very well for us. And this is something certainly anybody can steal with pride. So D&I journey in Pakistan, I think we are one of the companies who got the awards in 2021. We got out of 14 or 15 categories, we got 7 to 8 awards. So I think, and overall in the score as well, we performed very well. And this is where we want to strengthen ourselves, and we will be progressing well, and we want to invest further in these categories. I would like you to share, I want you to hear 2 stories of our employees. And this is just to give you a flavor that how we work at Nestle. So I hope the video is audible. Just give me a minute.
जब मैंने डे केयर यहाँ नेस्ले में ज्वाइन किया, जो कि वो लोग देते हैं और अप टू 6 ईयर तक आप एक बच्चे को फैसिलिटेट कर रहे होते हैं। वहाँ पे हेल्थ स्पेशलिस्ट भी है, सेफ्टी स्पेशलिस्ट भी है, केयर टेकर भी है। इन केस अगर मुझे ये वाला डे केयर ना मिलता और मुझे अपने बच्चे को घर छोड़ के माइट भी मैं अपना करियर जो है ना वो आगे प्रोलॉन्ग जो है ना फ्यूचर में ना कर सकती। ब्रेक द बाइस।
So this was one of our employee using, just give me a minute for another one.
जब मैंने डे केयर यहाँ नेस्ले में ज्वाइन किया, जो कि वो लोग देते हैं और अप टू 6 ईयर तक आप एक बच्चे को फैसिलिटेट कर रहे होते हैं। वहाँ पे हेल्थ स्पेशलिस्ट भी है, सेफ्टी स्पेशलिस्ट भी है, केयर टेकर भी है। इन केस अगर मुझे ये वाला डे केयर ना मिलता और मुझे अपने बच्चे को घर छोड़ के माइट भी मैं अपना करियर जो है ना वो आगे प्रोलॉन्ग जो है ना फ्यूचर में ना कर सकती। ब्रेक द बाइस।
So I think that's all from my side, and if you have any questions, I can take that.
Thank you so much. I think very well explained, Hajra. You've been able to, I think, connect the dots very successfully. And as Hajra already mentioned that in our D&I assessment framework, we monitor the level of maturity of the organization and also how sustainably they basically practice the D&I. So based on the 5 years record, the Nestle has been able to do it and is still doing and hoping to do it. The D&I very sustainably, and stands, we call it the most inclusive organization in Pakistan so far, and assuming at the global, it's also a global leader. So with this, I think we have some time for the question answer session. There's one question, and this is community of practice is a session where everybody had the opportunity to speak. So the question is about the, how do you connect the transgender? I know it's not a part of the presentation, so speaker has the leverage to respond to this question or not to respond, but transgender is one of the, you can say, dimension of the D&I. So I would like anyone who wants to respond to this question. I think Martha has already said something, but feel free to, let us know somebody who wants to respond. I have certain also some response, but I would like to defer it to the next. Okay, anyone?
Zahid, I can comment for our organization. When we talk about diversity, this is not that we separate transgender or we label male, female, transgender in different categories. It is just that you need to respect the overall diversity itself, and while supporting them, you don't need to launch any special initiative in this category. For example, for differently able, you certainly need to make some differences, but for transgender or for male or female, it is just a regular diversity policies that needs to be implemented. And I think at organization level, we need to work on inclusivity in this context. It is more important that you make them feel inclusive when they are working. And for inclusivity, we have a very, very strong programs within Nestle as well. But that applies in all dimensions. And maybe some other speakers, if you want to elaborate on this point.
Super. Thank you so much. So again, nicely explained. So I would like to say that transgender, as you know, is one of the component of the society, and they represent certain populations. I don't have the exact figures with me, but I think, like for example, I know about the disability, they're around 15% in Pakistan. So similarly, they represent a percentage of the population. So you have two angles. One is the social aspect, where you want to be a socially responsible employer, and you want to do some of the things where you think that it's an obligation. For example, KFC is having the, I think, disabled people, not call it disabled, but the differently abled people, you can say, food outlet on the Karachi, and it's very popular. Even the normal people visit there, and they're happy to consume food over there. So that's the good perception that you build, number one. Secondly, the business aspect. So where, for example, a bank which was starting to hire a transgender, I asked the same question, why do you do it? They said they can be our customers, and we would like them to be our customers. So in order to represent their mindset in our products and services, we need to have them at the workplace. So this kind of linkage you have to create in more specific terms, where you are able to really demonstrate the value out of it. So that's what I wanted to add on to what already was said. Okay, thank you so much. I think Hajra, one of our GDEIB qualified person, Marta from Spain, she is asking about the cultural aspects which you have shown in your slide number 8, the dimensions of the culture. And she said that, can you explain a little bit more about that?
All right, so I'm not sure it's in which context, but in the cultural context where I was sharing dimensions, there are 6 different dimensions on which we evaluate the culture. It was starting from, I need to open a slide, just give me a minute. So basically it is on the attractiveness. First of all, it starts all together from the awareness. Once you have the awareness fully implemented, then you need to see the flexibility side. Then you need to see the retention. Then also you need to work on the overall role models. Then we need to make a strong development plans for all this population. And also after that, we need to work on the attractiveness. So there are 6 dimensions that can help us on the overall D&I index.
Nice. Okay, everyone, please mute yourself. Thank you so much, Hajra. I think. Okay, Talha, would you like to mute yourself? Thank you. So Dr. Sadia Nadeem, she has certain comment or what Celeste is doing a lot. She's asking about the categories. In the GDEIB, there are certain categories, and she is interested to know that what are the different categories. For example, gender is one of them, disabled could be one of them, transgender. So she's keen to know that what all categories you are basically practicing and where you find the most challenge.
So I'd just like to hop in and clarify the question a bit. So what she means is that there are a total of 15 GDEIB categories, out of which how many categories does Nestle find challenging to adopt? And what specific steps has the organization taken? So, yeah.
Yeah, so basically, I would not say that it's difficult for us to adapt any of the categories because if you see the categories overall, they are pretty much linked with each other. The one challenge overall in the compared to these categories is coming towards the facility side, where it is on the remote locations. So at head office or at factories, it is very easy for us to manage the overall facilities for diverse pool. But the minute we get into the field sales and remote locations to manage the same level of facilities, whether it's daycare or any other facility, that becomes a challenge. And this is something where we are working now.
Excellent. So I think with this good discussion, we can move to the next speaker. Sarah Remel also has a comment. And Sarah, if you're comfortable, we would like to defer your question to the next segment because the conversation is on. It's all about the D&I, and we'd be happy to have anybody from the audience to talk about your comment and the question that you have on your screen. Thank you, Hajra. Hoping to have more conversation around these topics in the future. So I truly value your participation. Thank you once again.
Thank you. Thanks.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much, Hajra. It's absolutely a pleasure to see how Nestle has embedded the DEI in its structure. And I'm pretty sure like this, it's gonna go way forward on the road to DEI. So our next speaker on the panel is Janet Huber, Senior Vice President and Director of Diversity and Inclusion at BOK Financial USA. She's leading the diversity and inclusion, engagement, executive coaching, and mentoring strategic forward-thinking executives. She's passionate about establishing relationships and collaborating to facilitate cross-cultural dialogue and establish inclusive environments. She helps people and companies learn, change, and lead. Her proven track record includes transforming organizations by operationalizing strategies and executing large-scale human capital initiatives. Janet earned an MBA from St. Edward's University in Austin, Texas. Her extensive certifications include DEI in the Workplace certification, the ProSci Change Management certification, Neuroscience Brain-Based Coaching certification, Certified Strength Finder Practitioner, Certified Professional Coach, Arbitrator, Mediator, and Strategic Workforce Planning. Welcome, Janet, and over to you.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen if I can here. And so thank you very much for the opportunity to join this community of practice and have great discussion. I think we all learn from each other. So Zahid, thank you, and Seda, thank you very much for giving me some time. So I thought I would talk about driving the strategy. I think that's critically important. And what I would tell you for my organization, BOK Financial, we began this journey in June 2020. So it's relatively fresh and new for us as we've moved forward. And I'll share with you how we started and then what we've done to move that along. So when we think about the structure and practice, I think it's important to think about what does that look like in action. I love the benchmarks. I think when we talk about what is the structure, how do you drive structure? When we look at that, providing visible, dedicated support and structure with authority and budget to effectively implement DEI, that's critical to the success of a D&I strategy. DEI has to be integrated into the core organizational structures, policy systems, and practices. So for us, it's critically important for us to understand the goals, because we have to create alignment to the goals and to the metrics. And there has to be accountability at all levels to drive the change within our organization. And that's been something that I've tried to continue to champion that message. But just as important is to socialize those goals both internally and externally. So at BOK Financial, we post those on our website. We have a very strong ESG message. So he was talking about the ESG, and that's been helped us move our strategy and our structure along. For us, I think one of the most important things is to create that accountability, and the accountability by sharing the goals and the roadmap, or how are we going to get to those goals. And having a sound structure and a process really helps us to create those programs and practices that will ensure that everyone has the same opportunity, and that's that equity. In doing so, we create that equitable path forward. So in order to be successful, we have to build that into every touch point of the organization. And that's been a bit challenging, but I'll share with you what we have done. So in order to do that, we really needed to start with inclusion. You have to have an inclusive culture in order to retain diversity. So what does an inclusive culture look like? It's really not a metric, it's a value. It's creating a sense of belonging, respect for each other, fairness and fulfillment. And if you think about that, from that respect, the fairness and fulfillment, that reaches across all dimensions of diversity. If we can practice those things, it doesn't matter what lens anybody brings into the organization. If we treat each other with respect, fairness, and fulfillment, we can achieve diversity within our organization. When we think about diversity, it is a leading indicator. Inclusion is the leading indicator. Diversity is the lagging indicator. We have to be inclusive in order to retain, attract, and promote that diversity within the organization. So having an inclusive culture will really produce innovation, and having the diverse mix really enables that innovation that we know is so critical for organizations. So if we focus on the actionable insights, we only have 3 levers with which we can really change the face, and that's how do we recruit, who do we retain, and how do we advance our organization. And those are promotion metrics, and those are really inspection points that we've got to put some things in place to say, in recruiting, what does our talent pool look like? Do we need to cast a wider net to ensure we're bringing diversity, skilled, qualified people into the opportunity to have those hiring positions? And then retaining people, what does our internal mobility look like? Are we reflective of the communities that we serve? So when we talk about talent, we need to understand what the goals are and how do we leverage our internal talent for innovation and growth. And that's the structure with which we put into place. And we have to share those experiences necessary to build the talent, and that's done with a proactive structure. So I thought that I'd share with you some examples. We've tried very hard to link talent, engagement, inclusion, and link the data so that we can have a broader story. You know, how are we preparing diverse talent to be ready? Hajra talked about, organizations are diverse always at the bottom of the organization, but not at the top of the organization. So how do we work to implement structure to pull that diversity through the organization? And so we're not just diverse at the bottom, but we're diverse all the way through the organization. And you have to be objective when you look at it. Sometimes when we look at the data, it's not pretty, but we need to understand it and then objectively create a path forward. So creating that strong independencies of policy, structure, culture, and people, you have to have accountability and measurability. And you have to know your numbers, just like a doctor would say when you go for a physical checkup, you need to know your numbers. You need to know where your starting point is and where your opportunity for improvement and what does that look like. So we at BOK Financial created communities of practice, and we had some real interesting discussions about why you're not creating employee resource groups. But when an organization is just beginning this journey, it's important that you create it based on a business need where people can come together regardless of what line of business they're in, regardless of what they look like, and they can come together for a business purpose. And that's allowed us to be incredibly diverse, whereas if we created employee resource groups before people understood what diversity is, if we had a left-handed employee resource group, we'd only have left-handed people in there. So we wanted to create a place where people could come together, learn, grow, and be organically diverse. So communities of practice, we very much believe in them. We have 17 different communities of practice with over 1,400 active participants in our communities of practice. Mentor programs, we truly feel that a mentor program builds cultural bridges. So we have a mentor program. We're in our fourth cohort. We started last year. Our cohorts run about every 6 months. Some of them overlap. And we have built it on our core competencies where a mentor and mentee can be actively involved. We're intentional about matching people across culture so that we can continue to build that cultural awareness, reduce bias, and help people learn and grow. And then unconscious bias is mandatory for all managers. We also make it available for everybody in the organization. And our goal is to create a conscious, inclusive culture. So every year we create a conscious inclusion toolkit that has lots of learning built into it, a lot of activities, a lot of things that are non-judgmental to teach people how do we do better, how do we learn, and I think it's been very, very well received. We started with unconscious bias, and then we moved along to create the conscious inclusion. We continually look for ways to increase awareness, and that's really critically important. This past year, we do an employee engagement survey every year. We added additional diversity and inclusion questions, 5 additional questions, and with that data, we created an inclusion index to help managers understand. Gallup will tell you that 70% of engagement is impact of the manager. So helping managers understand what their role in engagement is. We want them to have a deeper understanding on how to be inclusive and how to hold others accountable. We know that we have to create that psychologically safe space, but we need our managers who touch people every single day. We need to teach them how to do that. And then increase that inclusion acumen, critically important. Some of the ways that we've done it with data is we have quantitative and qualitative data. We do skip level meetings. We feel like that eliminates the barrier for an inclusive workplace. And the one thing I would want to add is that I do feel like for leaders, it's not okay to be silent. The silence indicates agreement, and we have to really ensure that managers understand that. The other thing I think is critically important is we've tried to help managers understand that they don't have to have all the answers. They just have to be authentic in their discussion. That's how we teach them how to support each other, how to support their teams. Oftentimes, I think managers get stalled in that I'm afraid to have that conversation, so I'm not going to have that conversation, and we have to empower them in order to be able to have those deeper conversations. I equate it to going to a funeral. You don't know what to say, so you don't say anything, and that says you're in agreement. So we try and teach that message, and leaders have to hold each other accountable as well, and they have personal accountability. So DEI, we only focus on diversity and inclusion at BOK Financial, and it is integrated into the leaders' scorecards. In order for it to be successful, it has to be part of their business review conversation, just like any other piece of data. The numerics, the financials, D&I has to be right there with it. It's important that we lead with the data, but as you all know, in this as my D&I peers, we have passion for it, and that's critically important. So what I would say is that as we move, there's you have to tailor the D&I metrics to meet your business. We can overmeasure and end up with paralysis analysis, and that's not important. That gets us no place. We have to focus on how to best drive forward. What are the metrics that we need to bring to the forefront? And the other thing I would say is don't let perfection be the enemy of good. We've got to start small. We have to learn and then move forward and ensure readiness of the stakeholders. And that's critically important when we're using metrics. We have to make sure that they understand what are the metrics, why are they important, and why should I pay attention to them. So the work that we do as D&I practitioners, it requires us all to have courage, patience, and intentionality. We have to be in alignment with the business strategy. We have to think broader beyond the people goals. And you must have a strategy for structure and implementation. So if the organization is to be profitable and to grow, the structure and the goals have to be integrated into the business strategy and have the resources behind it to execute to it. I feel very fortunate to work for an organization that puts that first and foremost and has allowed me to implement some very wonderful programs that have helped us drive the strategy for an inclusive organization. So what I would close with is that, a leader sets the tone, and that is the most important. If we can get our leaders to believe, to move forward, to have conversations, it trickles down the organization. And you do not need a title to implement diversity and inclusion. It is everyone's responsibility. So he shared some stats, and I would just add to them to say that organizations that do this and do this well have a 45% higher innovation revenue. They are more profitable. They create more engaged employees. They're more innovative. They have 56% higher job performance, 50% decreased turnover, 75% reduction in sick days. And all of that comes most recently from a December issue of Harvard Business Review. So that's what I would like to leave you with, and open to have any discussions.
Super. I think Janet, very, I would say, well-rounded, and indeed, in certain cases, an eye-opener, where you say that 17 communities of practice. I'm sure this creates some amazing inclusivity in the organization. So a few questions. I think one of the question by is Musharraf Hai. And I must introduce her. Musharraf Hai is also the chair of the Women for Board group that we have to promote the women at the governance level. So she wants to know more, and she's asking that how mentoring drives the D&I, and what are the vital pillars of it. And then subsequently, I'll take more questions also. Thank you.
Sure. So our mentoring program is sponsored by our Diversity and Inclusion Council. When we base it on our core competencies of the organization. So if we ask a mentor, what is it that you have to give, or a mentee, what is it you want to learn? We're basing it on that core competency. We're also leveraging our HRIS team to pull the data for those people that participate, intentionally matching people across cultural differences, across lines of business, so that we can become more familiar with different lines of business, more familiar with different cultures, so that it becomes ingrained every day, and just for better conversations. It has absolutely allowed us to pull more talent through the organization, diverse talent from the bottom to the top of the organization. And that's been critically important for us.
Great. So another candidate, a participant indeed, Sarah, who is also from the US, she previously asked that do you provide any benefits to the transgenders, like 6-month parental leave? I don't know if it's part of your organization strategy or not, because it's if it is there, we would like to know more. And okay, and one more question, maybe you like to tackle simultaneously, that while you're managing the community of practice, what are the inputs? I mean, inputs in the, I'm assuming, the form of the information. So what are the inputs? And I would also like to ask you, what are the outputs, the measurable outputs of the community of practice? So 2 questions.
Sure. So let me start with the transgender. So we have never tracked sexuality besides male and female. And this passed in June 2021. We sent out and offered the opportunity for anybody who would like to tell us what their sexuality was, that we would love to know that, so that we can ensure that we put programs in place that help people bring their whole self to work. When we did that, we started to see an increase in people informing us about their sexuality. So we continue to put programs in place. One of our communities of practice is practicing inclusion, and we do talk about transgender. What does it mean? We always try and do it from a lived experience, where we're having somebody who lives that experience come and teach us what is that like? What can I do better? How can I be an ally? So that's how we do that with the transgender. When we talk about the communities of practice, some of the communities of practice have gotten very strong accolades from the leaders. It does require that we have a sponsor, an executive sponsor for each community of practice. For some of the communities of practice, they like one of them is Agile. And they come together, they share best practices, they have opportunities to lean in and participate in projects. And some of our leaders have said that that's been a great experience because they've had more junior people participate in there and be able to learn and jump on project teams and polish and hone their skills, where they've seen an increase in the skill sets within their group. So that's been a big advantage for us to have those communities of practice. And when we get that feedback, we love to promote that feedback so that people can come. It is also a talent hub for us. So if you think about a community of practice, there are people there that have all different levels, from a beginner to an expertise. So to be able to, maybe it's something that somebody doesn't even know anything about, and they come and they start learning, and they may say, I want to know more about that. I may want to transfer into that group. So it's a great way for us to for people to come learn maybe something they'd be interested in, and then become actively more involved and maybe transfer to a different part of the organization.
Perfect. And one of the participants is asking about the reference to the Harvard Business Review article that you would like to share now, or maybe you want to do it later because they want to learn more about it. You give reference to an article. Okay, so I think there's an interesting questions coming up. So in the interest of the time, we will take the questions subsequently. So Habiba, I hope you're comfortable if you take it in the next round of speakers. So Janet, once again, a lot of good insights, and I know I'm also in the United States, so it's quite a little hard to rise early in the morning, particularly once you're not used to it, but still we are grateful to you for your engagement, and we look forward to have more participation in the future. Thanks once again, all the best. So with this, I request Rida to move forward to the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Janet. It was wonderful to know regarding the many initiatives that BOK Financial is undertaking in order for the DEI agenda to progress. So now moving on to the next speaker, I'd like to introduce Sarah Baig, who is working at HBL as Head Talent, Diversity, and HR Relationship Management. She holds an MBA from LUMS and started her career in the FMCG sector with Colgate-Palmolive and Nestle in brand management, then worked briefly in the manufacturing industry in HR before joining the financial industry. Sarah has extensive experience in HR in areas like HR relationship management, talent management, recruitment, and learning and development. Diversity and inclusion is an area close to the heart of HBL, and Sarah, along with her team, are working relentlessly to make the environment more inclusive and welcoming. The bank has executed a plethora of diversity-related initiatives, which have been received very positively by staff across the organization. And the team is working with different stakeholders to expand the scope of inclusivity and diversity within the bank. Thank you, and over to you, Sarah.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here, and it's really nice to hear so many colleagues from different industries and different geographies talking about the same common goal of having a more inclusive work environment. And really, it's nice to see that a lot of pillars are also very similar, and all of us seem to be working in the same direction. I'm just going to share my presentation as well. Give me just, sorry, a quick second. There we go. Okay, wonderful. So here we are. We at HBL are really, really proud, to be doing a lot for gender and inclusivity of, all kinds. And it's really nice to see that, so many other organizations are also doing the same. We have picked up 2 of the benchmarks, which, I will talk about. Yeah, commitment from the top. I think both Janet and Hajra have talked about the fact that until and unless we don't have commitment from senior management, it is difficult to really deliver. And here at HBL, our management committee is really very, very involved in all types of initiatives, and they keep asking us for updates, and they keep giving us regular feedbacks as well. Perseverance and understanding the business case. Again, as Janet talked about the Harvard Business Review, and Hajra also talked about the same, that it has shown that there is a great benefit to the bottom line if there is a more diverse and inclusive work environment. Gender balance is not only a women issue. It's important to also bring the men inside this umbrella, and to make them understand that they have to take this journey with us. And in this line, we have been conducting gender sensitization trainings along with CDC, which we have imparted to all our senior management, and now we are cascading downwards. And we're also working on having an e-learning made so that when any new joiner comes in, it will be a mandatory e-learning which they will all take part in, and thus learn how to really deal with all types of people. And finally, very importantly, until and unless we don't create a safe and inclusive workplace, it will be difficult to really have a very strong D&I culture. And in line with that, I think Hajra also talked about having a speak up culture. We have an anonymous inbox here whereby people can anonymously raise any complaints if they have any. We have a whistleblow inbox as well, where again, people can anonymously just write in and let us know if there is any issue. And of course, very, very strong anti-harassment policies, which are followed through very, very strongly here in the organization. And we take every single complaint which we receive extremely seriously. And it is investigated till a proper solution is come up, has been found for that. Okay, I will talk about the benchmark which we have chosen, that leaders need to ensure that D&I is systematic, sustainable, and involves cross-functional collaboration. We have a diversity council which was formed in 2014, and basically any initiative which is taken under the diversity council, is sort of cascaded downwards. And this diversity council actually is run largely by business heads. So the buy-in is much larger because they are really involved in all the decision making, and they then ensure that obviously whatever is decided is then followed through and taken through right till the end. And the diversity council meets once in a quarter with a very strong set of deliverables, which are then seen through. We are very strong on our values, and one of the values is value people. And it's extremely important to ensure that everybody who's in the organization is really given a full importance, and all their differences are recognized, and they are given importance, and they are given the value which they deserve. And just for the forum, I'd like to point out that this year, for the first time, HBL is going to also include the values in its performance management cycle, the annual appraisal cycle, and there will be a financial element attached to this as well. So thus the value people part becomes extremely important for everybody. Policies, of course, all organizations are working on various policies, for people, to include people with disabilities, maternity leave. I think I just saw the 30 days paternity leave at Nestle also, which is quite heartening for a lot of, I think, men who are working in organizations. But I'm proud to say that we just launched in January a flexible work hour policy, whereby staff can choose to work any number of days they want from home. That's the first part of the policy. They can move their work hours around if they like, come in early and leave early, or come in late and leave late. And then we also have a compressed work week. So people can choose to say, okay, I will just work 4 days a week, but work extra hours during the week. So these are some of the policies which I think have really helped in driving this agenda forward and getting a lot more people to sort of agree with what we are doing and help us take it along the way. For our progress, 2014, we only had 3% gender diversity. Now we are standing at 20.6 as of yesterday. And we are looking forward to closing the year at least 22%, with the target of arriving at 25% by the year 2025. And for this, there are a lot of things which we have done. Batch hiring, we just hired 2 batches of tellers of 50-50 women each in various regions around the country. And these are the kind of policies or guidelines which help us really will help us hopefully arrive at this number. And in the financial industry, this is a big number, because in the financial industry, we have not really had in Pakistan more than a 18% diversity ratio. So we really are looking forward to a larger number. Okay. Moving onwards to the second benchmark which we chose. A large majority of employees across a wide array of diversity dimensions rate their leaders as trustworthy and citing equitable and inclusive treatment. In 2021, we had our engagement survey, which was managed by Mercer, and we took the results of the survey and we tried to include them as much as possible in our in filling in the gaps which we came across. And of course, we learned that, people wanted more females, more inclusive kind of an environment. And like I mentioned, we did a lot of batch hiring. We did a lot of targeted hiring. We run these internship programs called female internship programs, whereby we hire batches of females in various functions for 6 months. It's a paid internship. They work for 6 months. It gives them an opportunity to see the organization, and it gives us an opportunity to gauge them as future employees of the organization. And at the end of 6 months, there is an evaluation process, and whereby then we, the business can let us know if they would like to hire those people. And this has been a real success, and we get a lot of requests for batches of female interns. Returnship program we just launched last month. We're very proud. It's called WAPSI, and we are still in the process of tracking the numbers. We, till a couple of weeks ago, the numbers were very high, and the recruitment team is going through the CVs to try and see, which ones could be accommodated where. But again, I think this is hopefully going to be a very successful process for us. Training and mentorship, we have a very strong mentorship program running here at HPL. We run 3 mentorship programs, rather 4 at the moment. One is for your high potential talent, which has been identified across the bank. The second one is for all the management trainees who are hired. The third is called Falak mentorship, which is only for women, for senior women in the organization. They are mentored by other senior leaders. And the fourth one, which we have recently launched, is a reverse mentorship program. So the millennials are now mentoring the executive committee members. So that has also been really, really successful, and we're getting a lot of requests for these senior people to be mentored by the millennials. We have external coaching programs. We've got buddy programs, especially for the PWDs. When they join us, it's a little overwhelming for them to join an organization of 17,500 employees. Therefore, they're always tagged to one buddy who helps them settle down. Then another third thing which we do is try and celebrate our women. We're very proud that last month, we showcased one of the branch managers in a small region who took part in a Jeep rally drive, and she was the only woman in the entire rally. And it was a real success. She even won a certain prize, and HBL sponsored her through and through in the entire thing. And because this was such a success, now we, under the diversity umbrella, are going to be launching a new program called HBL, Talent at HBL. And this will be exclusively for women at the moment, starters, where we would like them to come up and let us know if they have a skill. We didn't know about this lady, and her skill of being a real fast track Jeep rally driver. And so we found out through other people. So we're hopeful that when we launch this particular initiative, we'll get a lot more stories and we'll be able to support them as much as possible. Like everybody's mentioned, of course, a safe and inclusive workplace is extremely important. The policies have to really be in place. They have to be robust. They really have to be followed through. And I think I'm proud to say here at HBL, we're very policy driven. At times we're told we're too policy driven because, we really follow everything to the book. But I feel that, the larger the organization, the more important it is to have a policy as a driving force to ensure that everything is equitable across all, levels, across all genders, across everything. And of course, infrastructure accessibility for PWDs. We've changed some of the washrooms in the larger buildings. We have ramps going up in all the branches now. So again, as much as possible, try and make it more inclusive. We have a reserved car parking for women, which was launched again last year, and every woman at every location will have somebody who will take their car and park it, thus making it easier for them to just, move around, etc. So, and these are really some of the things which we have been doing. We are, of course, extremely proud of what we've been doing. I think the needle has really moved. I've been here for 5 years, and I think I can safely say that from the moment, from when I joined to where we are now, the needle has really moved. And a lot of things have taken place, a lot of development, a lot of new initiatives. And we really have a lot more which are, there in our bucket at the moment. And we are very hopeful that we will really be able to provide a lot more support to women and to people of, who are differently abled, and try to take this forward as much as possible. So thank you so much for listening. And, if there's anything you'd like to ask, I must say that a lot of things mentioned by my, the two speakers before me, a lot of things are common. And I think the industry is generally moving in the right direction. So that's why I didn't dwell on a lot of things which they've talked about already. But if there's any other question, I would be very happy to answer. Thank you so much.
Super. So I think very exciting in terms of the, on account of the conventional and some of the unconventional things, Sarah, that your organization is doing. And I want to share with you that since the HR Metrics has introduced the global standards in Pakistan, so at many occasions, once we introduce something, we think that it's just an abstract form or generalized form. But it's very nice to see that once you have the initiative like the compressed work week, you have the reverse mentoring, you are rewarding a female for kind of, exciting work, gallantry work that they're performing. It's very inspiring for the industry, I think, to consider the HBL as one of the leading organization. And that's one of the reasons that based on our assessment of past more than 5 years, the HBL has emerged in the bracket of top 10 most inclusive organizations in Pakistan. So is there any question? I think previously one of the participants had asked a question, and that was primarily addressed to Janet, but I deferred the question. Anybody can answer. She asked about the different types of the community practice groups that can be there in organizations. For example, Janet referred to the 17 groups, but I said that question is open to be answered by anybody. So please feel free to comment on the question of.
You might want to do the front door, Grandma. There was a bug by there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry for that. Okay.
I already wiped it, but it's could use another wipe.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, so Janet said 17 community practice, agile. I think it's self-explanatory. So I hope Habiba, it takes care of your observation. and your question. Thank you.
you.
Okay, Martha has a question or comment ahead of the awareness phase, but how's your experience with the e-learning in creating a D&I conversation? This is interesting because now there's a more dependency on the e-learning aspect.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Absolutely. Actually, I find, of course, the classroom training has its own importance, and, you know, the interaction and, you know, the way people interact and they share information and they learn from each other. But I think the larger the size of the organization, the more difficult it really becomes to touch every single employee, especially when you have about, you know, an attrition rate of about 8 to 9% per annum. It means you're adding up about 2,000 to 3,000 people every year. And therefore, putting them through a training becomes classroom training becomes a bit difficult. So HVL has really been focusing a lot on developing e-learnings, and it's been a stage of experimentation, because we would find people would just, you know, skip pages and then just move on and not really read the material or really learn from the material. And so we've really developed the e-learnings to make them into interactive modules where there are games, there are videos, there are exercises where people have to really stop and respond along the way. And then, of course, there is a testing at the end. So yes, to answer your question, it has been reasonably successful. And I think we are moving towards a phase where a lot of our things now, we're working on gender sensitization, like I mentioned, e-learning. We have disability and inclusion e-learning again, which has been made, which is in the testing stage at the moment. Because again, how do you sensitize people? You know, with 17,500 employees across 19 regions in Pakistan, how do you sensitize all of them? So this is possibly the fastest and the easiest way to really arrive there. And it is reasonably effective, and we're hoping to make it even more effective as we learn along the way how to improve it and how to make it more effective. But I would advise that, you know, we really had been struggling with some of the programs which we have, which we needed to cascade to everybody. And it was a real struggle, because finding time, finding the right trainers, finding the right moment, people are busy, they've got their calendars. So the e-learning allows you to do it at a moment where it is convenient to you at, you know, a time which is suitable to you. So yes, I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely. So Sarah, once again, thanks. We want to have more conversation, but in the interest of the time, is there any question by somebody? Rida?
Yeah, we have a question by Musharraf Hai, and she says that, Sarah, can you please share some barriers that your organization faced on the organizational level, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah. Actually, Musharraf, absolutely, this is a very good question. You know, when you're spread across the country in so many regions which are very different socially and culturally, a lot of things do become a challenge. It's very easy to implement things in the larger cities like Karachi, Lahore, and Islamabad, and the audience is much more emancipated, and, you know, they understand things a lot easier, and thus it's very easy to, you know, really introduce anything and get the buy-in as well. But the struggle is largely in the regional areas. Smaller regions, women not really being accepted in branches, maybe as an example, how to bring them in, how to make people understand that they are your peers. And at times they will even do better than the male counterparts there. So for that, we have really started having a lot of engagement. Business and HR makes very regular visits, has gender sessions in regions, tries to you know, talk to the regional heads there, the area managers there, to make them understand, you know, how important it is to have a diverse environment, how to you know, make it a more inclusive environment, and the benefits behind it. And like I mentioned, that, you know, in these years that I've been here, I have certainly seen the needle moving in, even in this direction, and people have become a little more sort of aware and open. And I don't know if any of you saw in one of the social medias, but we just opened our first all women branch in Hyderabad. And in fact, the nice part about it is that other than the staff, even the guards who are standing outside the branch are females. So, you know, these are really steps which we've taken to go, you know, baby steps, as you can say, to arrive in a certain direction. But they, you know, obviously there's always, you know, people who will sort of push you back in your initiatives. But I think to answer your question in one word, it's been a lot of engagement. It's been excessive engagement with everybody along the way to sort of make them understand and to buy in to this philosophy. Thank you.
Interesting. And Sarah, would you like to give a brief insight regarding the transgender? Do you have any plans to do that, or you're already doing it?
Yeah, I was listening to Janet answering that question. I think I think that is something which is still on the table. And I think hopefully next time I'm here, if anybody from HBL is here on this forum, maybe we'll have something to add to that.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Okay, great. So looking forward to have more conversation next month, since we have a conference also. Sarah, I'm assuming that either yourself or somebody from your organization will be representing, and would like to know more stories about the HBL. Okay, with this, we would like to move to the next speaker. And once again, grateful for this impressive presentation, Sarah. Thank you.
Absolutely, Sarah. Thank you so much. And it's actually fantastic to see how HBL is revolutionizing the financial industry when it comes to implementing DEI. So with this, I'd like to welcome our fourth speaker for today, who's Mercedes Martin. And Mercedes, I apologize for missing you earlier.
No,
yeah, sorry about that. So Mercedes Martin, President and CEO of Mercedes Martin & Company, is from USA, who is a Cuban-born Afro-Latina former US Air Force officer and corporate executive with over 2 decades of experience in change management, consulting, executive coaching, global diversity and leadership development. And before launching her consultancy, Mercedes worked at Ernst & Young for almost 10 years as talent development and organizational change consultant and as a senior executive coach. After EY, she was EVP of Business Transformation and Innovation at Ashton 212 Consulting Firm. Early in her career, Mercedes served as a staff development officer and TQM coach in the United States Air Force. She is a native Spanish speaker, holds a Bachelor of Science in the Transcultural Nursing from the University of Miami, and a Master of Science in Leadership Development from the University of San Francisco. She holds the certifications from MEECO, the Master Corporate Executive Coach, 360 Assessment Coaching from the Center for Creative Leadership, and an Executive Coaching certification from Results Coaching Systems, Culture and Archetype certification, and Master Facilitator certification from Equity Institute. She's worked with Fortune 50 companies, including PepsiCo, Procter & Gamble, Shell Oil, and Kellogg's. Mercedes has pioneered global gender and diversity engagements across Latin America, West Africa, the United States, and Canada. Thank you, and over to you, Mercedes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks for helping me with the slides. And great to be here. And I'm not sure if I'm the last one, but bear with me because my colleagues have shared such great insights that I see all the connections. I'm connecting the dots as Zahid started, and I want to do that at the very beginning. The first slide here, if you can help me with, let me just start by describing the title, Human Transformation for Social Progress. And 5 practices was what I want to get to today, to share something with you and leave something like my colleagues have done before me that's practical and easy to apply right away. In 2020, as we were in the middle of the pandemic, I had the opportunity with my colleagues at Aperian Global to interview more than 80 leaders across the world and asking them in the middle of the pandemic, we were in the middle of the George Floyd anti-Black racist movement. There were all of these things that were going on, and really wanted to hear as senior leaders in these companies around the world, how they were experiencing or thinking of addressing the situation that we were in. So what I'm sharing with you today is really a compilation. It's the learnings that I took from that 2020 experience and working with these leaders, and the realization that we needed something very specific and to address the complexity with that C-suite executive group. So when Zahid starts with the connecting the dots, when Sarah or any of the presentations before talk about the programs and the initiatives that are going on, for some of these leaders, a small cadre, they wanted to know, and what comes next? What else? For many, and the way we looked at was, so how do you change or shift the mindset of leaders, in particular at that C-suite executive level, in the midst of so much complexity and so much going on? So with that context, this is for organizations that are moving beyond diversity, equity, and inclusion to this sustainable equity component. These are organizations that already have the consciousness, they have award-winning programs, but they know that they need to go to the next level. And that's what I want to share with you, what that work is looking like. But most important, to get your insights, and just as important, how does this apply around the world? And the first place with that, with that context that I want to start in the learning, was that changing mindsets is really at the core of what we're talking about, a major shift. And that shift needs to start at a very personal level with what is that leadership group thinking, mindset, and how does that mindset perspective then trickle across, down, and across the organization. In the next slide here, I talked about my narrative, and that's one quick way to highlight the need for and why the mindset and understanding purpose comes first. I use myself as an example. As you heard, I identify as a Cuban refugee. I identify as Afro-Latina. We came to this country in the 1960s and 1967, so still in the middle of the civil rights movement, migrated to Miami. What you see here in these pictures, the first one is what the freedom fights looked like after the 1957 Fidel Castro revolution in Cuba. And the next photo there is my first day here in the United States with my dad. And I use this photo as an example because as a 8-year-old, 50-something years ago, there was a lot of confusion when I reached the shores of the US. In one hand, yes, there was the opportunities that my parents, shared and the reason we came. And in the other, confusion around identity. My dad spoke a little bit of English, but coming in the middle of the civil rights movement, many thought, in the way you see him dressed there on our very first day, that he was part of a Black Panther movement or he was part of the civil rights. And we had no idea the depth of what was actually going on around us in society from a social and political perspective. So I grew up with this sense of not belonging. I'm not fully Black. The Latinos see me as Latina, but I'm Black. So there was this in-between existence, which I call living on the hyphen. And a lot of us have, when you really highlight and think of our identities in a way where I'm a woman, I'm Muslim, I'm this, I'm that. And I that notion of not belonging, or I love Maya Angelou's quote, we don't belong anywhere, we belong everywhere, we belong, is really what has driven my work and how I show up in particular with leaderships. The notion that looking for that connection, that hyphen that's going to support everyone to feel like they belong. So with that backdrop, let me share with you what our frame, and in particular working with leadership, looks like. You're great, thank you. The first that we see, and in particular, this became even more pronounced more recently after 2020, was connecting the dots and why this conversation was important, and what I call the sustainable equity. So it's more of a focus of, thank you, of a 21st century human-centric leadership. And I feel that we're seeing that need of the human-centric leadership being highlighted. And I see the conversation of diversity, equity, and inclusion as one door to get to this movement for the 21st century. This is the definition that we have. I'm not gonna go ahead and expand on it, but what you see is that by including the impact of not only the employee, the organization, the communities of the world, we're highlighting category 2 of the benchmarks. And in this particular definition, the context that I said there is 2.3, which reads, let me read it directly to you. Leaders and board members publicly support D&I related initiatives, even if they are perceived to be controversial or come with personal risk. So we're elevating and coming into that level of, yes, you're doing all of this in the organization. What happens when the social political issue will have is not in agreement with what's coming up, with what you're leading, what you're pushing, whether it's the transgender initiative or even the environmental initiative. So that's the first connect the dot that we're hoping and supporting the leadership on. And the second slide, we continue to connect the dots by sharing with them. This is the roadmap that and the resources that are out there to support you with this effort. So that I see the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and thank you, Zahid, because you set up the stage for us for this conversation. The UN Sustainable Development Goals are just that, are the goals that we use and support the leaders to look at this bigger picture and connect all of the dots. It's about moving beyond the diversity and inclusion business case to include along with it a moral case. Why is this important for me, not only as a business, but also the moral case and the responsibility that I have now as a leader? The benchmarks become just that, the benchmark that guide that path. And then last but not least, the ESGs become the metrics which we measure, we support them in measuring their success. So this is just another highlight and quick summary on how we're asking them to connect the dots. This one is what we've done is align the benchmark on leadership, accountability, and responsibility with benchmark number 11, which is connecting the dots in the D&I and sustainability. And in particular, the one that we highlight here is 11.3, which says that the organizations take a leadership role in influencing and supporting the connection of DEI and sustainability initiatives locally, globally, including being a champion of ESG and UN sustainable goals. What benchmark has allowed us to do is, again, elevate the conversation of diversity, equity, and inclusion to include the UN and this global perspective. So what has been supportive and how do we continue to set that context? I want to come back to mindset, but before I do that, let me share a little bit more. In 2020, what we started seeing and continue to see to this day is an increase on the public's dependence, society depending on business to take the responsibility or really create the change that we want to see in the world. So you're seeing quite a number of movements of business for better, good business, better world, that kind of combination. a lot of that has come from the Alderman Trust, which this one is from 2021, and 86% of the results said that they expected senior leaders or organizations to respond to a lot of the societal and complex issues that we were facing. As you see there, the Black Lives Matters, the overall racial awareness, and I like to call it the identity awareness movement. You had the COVID, the economy, the environment, and there's this pressure now from this at this group level. And again, I'm talking that CEO, senior executive, to make decisions at the same time that they're moving the needle on everything that's D&I. And I'm not compartmentalizing, but what I am highlighting is that there's a certain urgent and need at one level of the organization, while the rest of the organization is moving forward with the D&I strategy. And let me give you an example of what I mean by that. In this next slide, if you can help me with that, there you go. So this is and by the way, this is the case study that we use to support leaders with this conversation. Some of you might be familiar with it. I'm part of a UN committee that's looking at how we're changing leadership mindsets, leadership education to be able to grasp the UN sustainable goals and the work that we're doing here. So I use this case study, which by the way, at the end of the session, I'll be able to share this with all of you. And it's also an article that I wrote in my LinkedIn. So this is Florida, and this is our governor. I live right now in Florida after 30-something years in California. And for those of you who know the history between here in the US, between California and Florida, know that I'm living a very diverse and very different perspective or life than when I was in Cali. So DeSantis is the governor, and he's really quick signed a bill that it's been called the Don't Say Gay bill. Pretty much really quick, what it says is that schools cannot teach on gender identity for students, and that parents are the ones to decide. And what that has caused is quite a bit of controversy between parents, family, and education. What I want to focus on is not necessarily the bill and the controversy that that's brought, because that's an example of a societal conflict, dilemma that's also social political. What I want to focus on is Disney, who has been leading, like many organizations here today, on not only gender identity, but the whole D&I platform. And the employees at Disney, when this bill is signed, are saying to the execs, hey, we got to say something, because this is contra what our own policies and our own work on D&I is about. The CEO at Disney takes 3 to 4 days to respond to this issue. And many of you addressed this and named it as, I heard Zahid talked about this lofty mission. Some of you, I think it was Sarah, that talked about the need for the mindset shift and also the responsiveness. Well, it wasn't acceptable for the Disney employees that here's an organization that has a beautiful D&I journey. It's been going on for quite a while. And at the same time, they say nothing. So it's become a major controversy, but more from the Disney angle. Again, I'm looking at what was the leadership thinking and how do you address these issues? And one, you're hearing me tell you that right now, the public wants the D&I, wants not just the D&I, but organizations to take that role in addressing societal issues. And at the same time, here's an organization that's doing that and the impact that it's having is that as a result, the Florida legislature has pulled all of Disney's benefits as a corporation effective next year. We don't know where that's going to go. We haven't heard from other CEOs. We haven't really heard from Disney itself. And that right now, in not only in Florida, but around the world in the communities that we're having this conversation and looking at this case, is an example of where's the voice, where are the pledges, and how do you address situations like this, or even prepare in the future for situations like this in your workplace. So this is an example of a case. This is an example of, yes, connecting the dots, but also being prepared on looking at all of the dots that need to be connected and how you respond to it. I'm going to move on and leave you with this question. One, which I love to ask, especially when I'm in global settings like this, how would you address this leadership challenge and how would it be different? I love the question earlier this morning, when you put on your own cultural lens to this conversation. I know that many of you are in Pakistan, so are there examples like this in Pakistan? Organizations where they found themselves in this connecting the dots, but in the middle of that hyphen of identity that I talk about. And what was the response, and where are the resources, the conversations that need to happen in order to be able to address this? Knowing that I was not going to have enough time to go deep in this case, and I feel it is so crucial for our times, I also will send to you the article that addresses some of these questions, and in particular, what are the future seeking questions. Let me go into, as they're just talking about this challenge, which a lot of it, by the way, is how do you think of the future? How do you shift mindsets is a lot of what this work is about. Let me share with you some of the principles that then we introduce at this leadership level to be able to grapple, have the tools to grapple with these certain examples. The three principles that we introduce is the whole need of rewiring the leadership mindset. That command and control, I don't say anything until I have all of the answers, does not work any longer. You need to get out there, you need to speak, even though you don't know exactly what all of this means. But that's where we're introducing the whole notion of vulnerability to the leadership. The humanizing the workplace is important. So how do I show up as a human-centric leader for my entire organization in the midst of me as a leader in the external world, right, and the outside perspective dealing with this? And last but not least, how are you redefining the future? A lot of what we support in the work here with leaders is, if you're in a state like Florida that's moving into a certain political direction, are you asking the questions of yourself and your leadership team on how you're going to navigate when there's tension between your policies and what the geopolitical environment in your country, in your state are coming up with? Let me just highlight then the approach in the next slide here. This is really a McKinsey model that looks at where organizations are at, and what I used to think that depending on how you answer these questions, it would give me idea of where to start, or where you were at as a leader, where you were at as an organization, and how you were thinking of transformation. And I'm including this here in particular around purpose, because what I'm finding is that with the level of complexity, the volatility that we're dealing with today, you're going to have pockets of the organization that are going to be all over the place. There's not necessarily everybody's moving in the same direction. And I'm also adding it because a lot of times I was applying this lens to the full organization. And in reality, it's the mirror, is where the organization is at for a lens on how they're going to do the work, but it's also where we're inviting the leaders to pick up a mirror and look at themselves and understand that the organization is there because of their early own purpose. Remember my origin story and how comfortable they are in moving the needle on these topics. Let me show you what I mean by that. If you look at the next, so what ends up being is, depending on the question, you're either focused on compliance, you're focused on a program, you're focused on system, and what you really want in the invitation is, how do we get to this ecosystem transformation? In the next slide, I highlight that on how that looks. A lot of organizations, a lot of what we hear are in that identity change. You're looking at systems, it's leader-led. And my invitation is, let's look beyond change to transformation. If you're a Disney leader today, how are you involving the whole system? And how are you understanding that your response to a bill and how it impacts your organization is not just about a program of what the leaders think, but it needs to be you connecting the dots as we're shared with all of these different components and tools that are out there. That's going to require, in the next slide, systems thinking. It's going to require what we call, and Isabel Yawakowski has written, a sustainable mindset. And what I've done to that sustainable mindset, which you notice that includes systems thinking, emotional, spiritual, and ecological, and added the equity component to it as well. What I usually get in response, and especially outside of the United States, is that thank you for the spiritual intelligence. Because when we talk about the depth of transformation, we're talking about it from the spiritual. I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about this sense of oneness with nature, oneness with mindfulness, and the whole purpose direction of what we're going, the interconnectivity of what we're talking about. I'm going to end, because obviously you can tell that this is a much longer conversation, but I wanted to give you enough to spark the discussion here. And this next slide, I wanted to end with what is the roadmap. So out of all of that complexity and really big picture that I just share, what hones it in is, how do you shift mindsets, and what are the practices, almost like your daily habits, that will support the interconnectivity that we're talking about here, and really understanding the complexity of what we're talking about. Start with self-reflection, shift from the lens to the mirror work. And by the way, each one of these practices is supported by the research and deeper research and work. Create a safe and brave places, shift from the masking to rewarding and vulnerability, build trusting relationships. You shift from the tribal and transactional to a trusting and human-centric relationships, align the short-term and the long-term, and convene alliances and social networks in order to be able to move the needle forward. Last but not least, what I've included here for you, because this is something that we will share, is how to take those practices and practical and turn them into an action plan, starting with us as practitioners. A lot of times I work with groups and see that we also as practitioners need to start by looking at our own mindsets, our own practices, and how they're in alignment or outdated in some cases to where the client is needing and wanting to go. So just what you might call it, an example here of what that would look like into practical terms. The two ways that we introduce this process in organizations is through a humanity labs, So we take senior leaders through an explanation and experience where they understand and see themselves through these lenses and these practices. And then the second is when it's time and they're ready to bring it to the whole organization, what we call a Soda Mesa experience, where you bring the whole organization into conversations on how to move the system, how to move the ecosystem, and how to connect the dots for themselves, for their personal transformation, as well as the whole organization. So it's a collaborative, collective wisdom impact piece that we're introducing. Let me stop there. All of this will be in the deck. There's a whole lot more on the deck as well on how the ESGs and all of these connect the dots. But for the purpose, and I know for the time, I'm going to stop and facilitate any questions that you might have at this point.
Excellent. Again, another very good presentation, Mercedes. One of the questions that I have, and I would request, I mean, in the interest of the time, a short answer for this. There are two types of organization. One is that where there's already a precedence. So D&I work has already been started and you're building to it. You're building on to the existing developments. But the challenges for the new organization where there's no past precedence and the organization wants to pursue, for example, the practitioners of the D&I or the HR practitioners. So what is something most innovative thing that you can suggest for such an organization where there's no past record and you want a buy-in of the leaders? So what's something that can be done to get the buy-in of the leaders?
Yeah, thank you, Zahid, and a great question. And my colleagues mentioned this earlier. I totally believe that senior leadership commitment and clarity as a way to start is absolutely necessary, and today even more so. So if you're an organization that's in that phase one that might even still be looking at the D&I as a compliance or risk mitigation, at first I thought that would be an organization that would take so much longer to get to transformation. But what I'm learning and experiencing is that with those organizations, sometimes it's even easier if we start with, we remove some barriers, if we start with that deep leadership understanding, and that helps accelerate this human transformation into that piece. So I would go back to the leadership accountability. I would go back to the benchmarks, not necessarily start with a 2.5, but definitely include some of those in there.
Excellent. So I wish we have more time to hear your interesting personal story, which you have been able to blend, very effectively with the requirements of the D&I. Okay, Dr. Sadia, we also have a question, but I would request you if you can defer this question in the interest of the time, if you're okay with it. Thank you so much. So with this, we move to the last speaker, and thanks a lot, Mercedes, for spending time being with us and sharing your very interesting and exciting story. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I know with the short time, any questions or anything else, please just reach out to me, and happy to answer.
Sure.
And again, the article and the PowerPoint we will share. Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to be part of the community.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mercedes. It was great. It was a great session, and especially the example about the Disney and all the scenario was quite practical. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
For our last but not the least speaker for today is Habiba Sulman. This topic is quite interesting because often I come across DEI professionals who are either already spearheading the DEI agenda or are making a start, who question regarding how the GDEIB assessment is carried out, or it can be carried out for their organization. So for this purpose, we're very excited to have Habiba Sulman, the Senior Vice President at Faisal Bank, who works as the country head of D&I and head Learning and Development for Central and North. A strategic, pragmatic HR professional leading learning and reskilling design for biggest Islamic banking transformation and significant growth from 200 branches to 600 plus branches in the last 5 years. Habiba is a certified diversity practitioner and spearheaded the D&I strategy from scratch at Faisal Bank, making it one of the organizations now being recognized for its D&I practices. Habiba has been directly responsible to set up Faisal Bank's signature program known as Faisal Islami Kabil, which is a special initiative for differently abled people and leads the Faisal Islami Women Connect Forum to lead gender diversity and development. Faisal Bank has recently implemented a number of successful initiatives on DEI front under her leadership and was also the recipient of 5 Global Diversity and Inclusion Awards for the last 2 years. Habiba is SHRM's SCP certified and has done her MBA in HR from NUST Business School, Pakistan, and has worked in organizations like Citibank and Royal Bank of Scotland before being associated with Faisal Bank. Thank you, and over to Habiba.
Thank you so much, Rida, and it was great hearing from all my presidents here. And relatively speaking, Faisal Bank is a new organization who's been working on diversity and inclusion as compared to some of the other mature organizations who were presenting here. So I can actually talk about how we started initiating the D&I practices in the organization, and would take this opportunity to do so. So assessment and measurement was one area of interest where Zahid requested me the other day that because before we started with the D&I strategy, where we wanted to see where we are currently and where are we starting from and where we want to be. So it was very important for us to see where we are, where we want to go. So what we did as a first thing, we set ourselves some strategic objectives, of course, because without those strategic objectives, we just could not, do an assessment. So we had to have some objectives in place, and we set these as strategic objectives for ourselves and got them locked from our board of directors, because everybody said that the leadership support, the leadership from the top has to do it. But I believe that the D&I agenda is a board agenda. If your board is not driving it, your leadership will not be able to drive it. So, but what I would like to go back to is to Mercedes, what she was talking about, the change in leadership mindset. And I would like to say, I think our Islamic banking transformation, the one we are doing from a conventional bank to an Islamic transformation, it's one of a kind globally. And one of the biggest transformation of this kind is happening here, led to us to practice diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because once we started redesigning our culture, redesigning our behaviors, we found that Islamic values of equality, values of diversity and inclusivity as a priming diversity force is required to become the employer of choice when we talk about the Islamic financial industry. And of course, we wanted to obviously focus on a few things, because once we are starting out, we cannot do everything in D&I. So we, as a cornerstone of our D&I strategy, went to gender diversity, equitable opportunities, and differently able inclusion. So we had to put in a framework in place. So our framework started from the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Pakistan is a signatory to that, and we wanted to start right from there, the agenda from the regulator and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So we wanted to see what we can actually do to make ourselves, how we are doing on the GDEIB model. And last year I got the opportunity to attend this certification, and it helped us see where we are. So we defined our D&I vision. We looked at our policies and procedures, and let me tell you, we had to look at a number of policies and procedures in, the HR policy, the banking on equality policy for financial inclusion, for the persons with disability policies, maternity policies. So a number of policies had to be devised, and the center of all those policies was the D&I policy, which got approved earlier last year, even before the regulator asked us for so. And we also looked at some other HR inclusive policies which are required to, build that culture we are all talking about. And as we talk about the support and the commitment from the leadership, actually, it was our CEO who requested us just not to look at the, HR policies, we also wanted us to see how we are serving them. As we were speaking the other day, what are our people representing who we are serving? So product and service policies was something product and service people were also asked to do. And then, the workplace amenities. And then came the third step, which we are still working on for point number 2 and point number 3, is the DEI awareness trainings and projects, marketing, customer and stakeholder experience. This is something we are working on, and we have started this journey. But the framework is now there. We've done our organizational assessment, though there were quite some challenges which we came across during the organizational assessment. However, let me just take you through so we wanted to use the GDEIB model as a starting point when we started with the D&I journey. And these are some of our objectives for using this model. We wanted to set and stretch standards and agree on our desired state. We wanted to assess our current state of D&I because we were already doing some things on persons with disability. We were about 15% gender diversity good 3-4 years back. Today, we are almost 20%. And this is the highest in the Islamic financial industry. We developed for ourselves some short-term goals and long-term goals. And of course, then we have to measure progress. Where are we going? Is it improving our employee engagement? Is it improving our net promoter score? So these are some things we wanted to look at. So before I go into how we went about the entire assessment, I'll quickly take you through what we've all been doing. And, since there are some things that have already been discussed by other colleagues here, so I will not take much of your time. But it is, as mentioned by every one of the speaker, that it is the support from the leadership that is going to make it happen. So these were the things we were already started to embed by like 2017, 18. We had started doing these things, and by 2020, we gave it a structure and a framework to bring it all together. This is our head of HR, and as I said, the transformation led us to the diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we wanted to give back to the society. We wanted to help differently abled people to become productive members of the organization. So there were a number of leadership initiatives we wanted to take up. We wanted more women to become part of Islamic financial industry, because this is an area we find that women have much less representation even than the regular financial industry in the Islamic financial industry. And this is an area we really wanted to promote women, because that's what our religion preaches us as well. So this is something we wanted to work on. So that's what we've been promoting women in the Islamic financial industry. And then we came up with our Faisal Islami Women Connect, where this a mentoring program that has helped our junior women grow into senior role models. Last year at the end of the year, like December, we launched our Nia Safar. It's a returnship program for women bankers to join us back at various positions. And this will help them to restart their journey. And we've been able to hire a good number of people, about 8 to 10 right now. And this again, this improving. So I cannot actually give you. We are still working on this. This was something we done in 2020. We hired a batch of visually impaired people in the call center. And it was just not about hiring diversity or hiring diverse talent. It was also about providing them the infrastructure, making them feel included. So we had to, install a system in the call center where they could actually work like regular employees. Sensitization trainings were done for their managers. An inclusive environment was provided to them in order to ensure that they feel included in the organization, and then they can also grow there. Then last year, we launched Faisal Islami Kabil program, a program for differently able, an internship program where we also hired some hearing impaired people, and we had to go back and collaborate with an organization who helped us with virtual interpreter services for them. Even we conducted our trainings and orientation sessions through the interpreter sessions. And that interpreter application was available for our manager to communicate with the deaf impaired staff throughout their internship. And the feedback we had was great, both from the manager and the intern who was there. So it is, since persons with disability is the cornerstone of our D&I strategy, there is a lot of work that is being done to ensure that now we have different hearing impaired people in the organization, so that they can have regular careers. Because if we just look out for jobs for them, which is, where they can fit in, our aim was that they can have regular jobs with interpreter applications so that they are not restricted a lot. So these are some of things we've been working on. Our inclusion just doesn't include inclusion from the employee front. We work on a lot of CSR initiatives as well, financial literacy initiatives, teaching women, rural women, how they can go about and have access to financial services. Last year, we launched all female branches in all main cities of our 4 main cities across the country in order to improve financial, especially considering that we are moving towards an Islamic banking direction. We wanted to give that facility to our female customers so that they may feel more comfortable. We are addressing that segment of the society, which are now our customers. So this is our small journey, and there's a lot more we want to do towards making our organization truly inclusive. This is just ensuring now that we have diverse talent and we have inclusive organization. We won awards for the last 2 years, that's there. So coming to the GDEIB assessment results, actually what we did is we developed a survey around each benchmark, best practices, proactive, progressives, and we went to each and every department head and conducted a survey with them. And against each benchmark, we discussed what they had, what they didn't have, what they would like to implement, or what they won't like to implement, because it's not simply possible to implement everything from out of the benchmark in each of the category. It's not, for instance, in learning and development, if we can implement 3 things from progressive, maybe we cannot implement everything from the best practice. We are not at that stage of the organization. So it was a discussion with each and every related stakeholder. For instance, product development, we went to 3 or 4 product heads who had different products in the organization, and then some of them felt that they were progressive, the other felt they were proactive, the other felt they were inactive. The biggest challenge, though, which I faced, and I also was telling this to Rida last night, was that some of them would always say, we are very progressive here. No, we are doing this. If they're done one thing, or if they've done 2 things, they would say, no, we are very progressive because, we are now doing this. So it was very important for us to have some sort of impact indicators there as well to measure progress. So what we did was that we added another index, which is known as the Gartner index, that helps us monitor some of the percentages. So what we did was, for instance, if you're talking about vision, strategy, and business impact, and we have a diversity, equity, and inclusion council right from the lead. It's a leadership council. It's a management committee overseen by the BOD as well at times on various initiatives. So we want to see what kind of impact indicators we can use in terms of performance. So as mentioned here, some of the DI targets became part of functional head KPIs in January this year. So what we will be monitoring a percentage of leaders who will be achieving their DI specific MBOs or KPIs, and this is being monitored through the DI Council Committee. Because numbers are shown to them on their KPIs in terms of department-wise, cadre-wise, where they need to improve every quarter or every 6 months, depending upon the priority of the subject being shown to them. So some of the impact indicators we added to the benchmarks. For instance, if I moved to the recruitment advancement and I needed to have some impact indicators to my benchmark, we wanted first of all to see percentage of diverse talent pool. Everybody is monitoring that. Frontline mein kitne hain, senior management kitne hain, middle management mein kitne hain, differently able, how many do we have in differently able segment. So percentage, and then the biggest challenge the financial industry overall I feel faces is the percentage of diverse talent pool in leadership positions. We want to have more females in leadership positions, and how much of our divert movement is happening towards that end. So this is some area we are also looking at. So in keeping that in view, we added an indicator this year, which is known as increase in diverse workforce promotions, whether more diverse workforce promotions happened this year instead of, as compared to last year. So this was something we've added to see whether there is a movement along those lines in terms of advancement, in terms of compensation. As Sarah mentioned that there are the number of women are working in improving in their batch hiring. So is the case here. So percentage of diverse candidates in total batch hiring especially is improving. There was about 45% women in our batch hirings this year as compared to only 25% in the last 2 years. So that's an increase we are seeing. Then employee engagement scores or index. We've conducted our employee engagement scores 2 years back, and there's a steady increase on the inclusion front. But we've put on hold the inclusion statement because we wanted to do some work before we went back and asked employees about inclusion itself. So we will be conducting our inclusion survey this year, inshallah, but we wanted to do some work before we went and asked people how they feel about the overall environment in the bank. And now we feel that we are in a position to go back and conduct this and then, monitor its strength. Similarly, turnover in diverse talent and how it is happening, DI training, how much a percentage of DI training are we offering to our managers, especially where the transformation will actually happen, number of DI specific training courses which are being hired. So these are all matrices we feel that help us, put this together. And we wanted to see, so as I said, that this was something we were looking at organization-wide and not just as HR perspective. So we looked at our products, we looked at what we could do in terms of our female financial inclusion, what we could do in terms of thought leadership. Zahid has been really helpful in supporting organizations in coming up with thought leadership and the DI awards or DI articles that can help other organizations as well. So our philanthropy efforts, our CSR efforts are also linked to the D&I mission. As I said, this is all driven by the top. If we feel our CEO and board of directors embed D&I in everything we do, and as Janet said, it's all about diversity and inclusion is everybody's responsibility and not just HR's and top leadership's responsibility. Thank you for your time, and I'm available for any questions.
Super. Another amazing addition of the learning, and I think one of the stronger aspect was the measurable objectives that the Faisal Bank is setting, because that puts you in a good position to understand where you stand previously and where do you want to go, and whether you have been able to be there where you wanted to go or not. So this is definitely very useful learning. Thanks, Habiba. Very clear progression on the D&I, and we hope that the journey continues. So with this, we are going to conclude. And if there's any question by anyone, I know this is the time to sum it up and time for iftar also. So if there's still any questions, or let us know. Basically, our overall purpose is not to give any solution to anybody. The purpose is to create a dialogue. And as Habiba has mentioned, that D&I is not about hiring people or the training people. It's a very pragmatic and 360 approach, starting with a strategy, moving along the HR component, the organization's product services, and finally seeing in measurable terms as to what extent your vision, mission that you have set for the D&I, it serves the purpose of the sustainability of the organization. So very good example that we have come across. And we look forward to have the next session in the month of June, where we would be talking the HR bit of it. The HR bit includes the recruitment, the advancement, the development part of it, the compensation, the benefits. And I hope that more people come forward to share their learning with us. So after this webinar, and I think the next 1 or 2 days, you can expect a survey in your inbox where we would like to know how you have felt about it and how you can be part of the journey as an organization or as an individual. So it's an opportunity for the mutual learning, and we wish to continue this opportunity. Okay, thank you once again. And with this, I think we can close the session, and all the best. Take care of yourself, the esteemed speakers, and all the valued participants. Take care and all the best. Bye-bye.
Sorry to interrupt over here. There's just one question that I'd quickly like to take from Bakr Ahmed. And he says that, do you have any female branches, Habiba?
Yes, we do. We have 4 female branches, one in Karachi, one in Faisalabad, one in Lahore, and one in Islamabad. The idea is to, improve female financial inclusion, specifically in these branches, and they have specific targets to improve, female financial inclusion there. And it's just not, there for ensuring that they have an inclusive environment, but to ensure that it really helps women.
Fantastic. Hope Bakr, that answers your question. Once again, with this, I thank you all for taking your time out of your busy schedule and joining us today. And I'm very much looking forward to staying connected with all of you through opportunities for mutual learning in the future as well. Thank you to all the presenters and the audience, and have a great day ahead. Thank you.